Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. First of all, Thomas, I'd like to thank you for your enormous contribution in the article that I have linked below. It is a big article, and you know, some people don't like to read these articles first. They like it when you tell them what they're going to see. Maybe when they're driving home, taking a walk, they can listen to that, and then if they're interested, they can click below and read the details. So what you're showing us is one big global gravy train. What did you find out?
Well, Betsy, in the way that we discovered the mechanism for the shadow government, what people call the deep state, through the senior executive service, and then the way that they basically are the bureaucratic status quo, the career politicians, the people who make sure that nothing really goes forward in Washington, D.C., unless it's in the same channels of money that the money is used to flowing in. Those are the people that then give out contracts to companies like Serco. And when we looked into Serco, we found out that it was a British company, in fact. And then we looked closer and we found a company called the Crown Agents USA Incorporated. And they go back to Britain again, and they go back to a not-for-profit organization. And you think, well, wait a second, wait. These Crown agents stand in line to get the money from what we call foreign aid, or what is called the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, or United States Aid, it's often called. So as we looked at the way that money came out, in the same way that money comes out in these non-bid contracts to Serco, who has their fingers in everything, and that's British, we looked at to see if, in fact, the British were receiving money from our foreign aid system, and they are, to such a degree that it led us to another somewhat shocking revelation. And one could even say breaking news, because people don't seem to know this because it's so well hidden. And we could only do this because of our cooperative venture and collaboration with Michael McKibben and the geniuses at Leader Technologies, as well as his friends at the Americans for Innovation, who have put endless hours into researching these things to find out how these British corporations actually go back to the Bank of England, and that there is literally a thing called a golden share owned by the Crown of England. So when we looked into Crown Agents USA International, we thought, oh, that's going to be an American company. No, it's definitely not. And they stand and receive money. No one knows how much. They make $100 million a year just managing this money that flows through them. But they take money in the order of billions of dollars from the USAID, and they then basically channel it into companies that they own in third world countries. For instance, Crown Agents USA International own many ventures in Africa. As a matter of fact, they own the companies that provide most of the services, electronic services, banking services, ATM services, media services, telephone services, gas stations. All these things are owned by a variety of companies that, when you look, those are the companies who own the major shareholders of the Crown Agents USA Incorporated. And so you say, wait a second, the United States $27 billion going out through USAID gets shuffled into who? It gets handed over to a group that's been in existence since 1833, the Crown Agents, and they then take that money and then they do what with it? Well, who cares? It's not really tracked much after we give it away. And then they spend it, supposedly, on third world countries that they own the services there. So no matter what, if they're giving it to those countries in any kind of services, then what happens? They enrich themselves. Now, it gets really sticky after that, but let's just say in 2016, Obama gave away $50 billion in foreign aid. Now, many people are going to say that's less than 1% of our GDP or whatever. I don't care. I didn't see $50 billion going to people who were starving in America. I didn't see $50 billion going to people who actually needed it in America.
Do you know
in
the
our
infrastructure
shores.
in America needs fixing like tremendously? And we think we're doing good and sending money over there to needy people, but that's not it, folks. I mean, I saw a document which really got me all upset about this. Just a little document with a lady's signature on it. Okay, we're going to give $6.5 million to and name any corporation you want to feed the hungry in name any poor country you want. Yeah, like right. Why don't I just give the aid to them directly? And they don't. They have this whole system set up where everybody's taking their cut, very large cuts. And it shocked me when I heard that Ivanka Trump is now associated with this Senior Executive Service Operated OPIC. I know you're going to talk about OPIC, OPIC, for the empowerment of women down in South America. Is it South America? Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, I thought, well, either she's in on it and she wants a little piece of the action, or maybe daddy sent her in, kind of like, you go check this out. I heard there's some corruption here. Find out where it is. But I'm saying I'm watching, and I want to make sure that every dollar that she's in charge of actually gets to the women in South America. But then it leads me to the question, what about the women in America that need this?
I think you're right. I think Ivanka's being sent in to bust open OPIC. OPIC is another downline mechanism to enrich the same people who get money from USAID. So USAID gives money to these humanitarian causes. No one really looks into who they are, and then the money comes back to the very people we give it to. Now, we don't give it to any foreign country or any foreigners. We only give it to American agents, or U.S. sponsors, they're called. So these sponsors then do really weird things with that money. We'll go into that in just a minute.
Why in the world are we giving foreign aid money to corporations and banks?
When we already have the United Nations World Health Organization, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, we already give away tens of billions of dollars to support the United Nations institutes and agencies that do this on a very profound level. Why is there this type of aid? Well, it is strictly the domain of the Secretary of State or the State Department. So,
well, could that be associated with Hillary?
Oh my goodness,
a little pay to play here.
$50 billion goes out, and we don't know how many billions came back to the Clinton Foundation. But wherever she went, I think she went to 127 countries. And of them, I think, I forget the number, but about 100 of them or so donated then afterwards to the Clinton Foundation. And of course, then she allowed the Secretary of State discretionary funds, these $50 billion in U.S. aid, both military and otherwise humanitarian, to go to these very countries, most of the times through weapons deals. And then here's what needs to be clarified. When she made those weapons deals, that just means that Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon simply got a contract with that country to deliver an order.
And
it wasn't that we gave money.
And where does Lockheed Martin track back to?
It tracks back to the Queen and her golden share through Serco and through AWE and through BAE. We're going to be going into another big expose on that to show that the three largest military contractors in the world are basically principally owned by the British Crown. That is even including here in America. So it's a bit shocking what we're finding out, but I guess we shouldn't be too surprised. We never really won the first American Revolution by what we are finding out. But anyway, going back to the way that the money streams down.
Well, I want to stop right there and just say, because it's a real big red pill for people to realize that our history books did not teach us truth. That at one level, we may have won the American Revolutionary War, but when you really look, the Brits, who had, certainly run civilizations for a lot longer than these young, scuffy Americans, they said, we'll let them think that they won the war, let them have their heroes, and let them do this. But we're going to get our crown agents in place, and then eventually we will kind of infiltrate ourselves into their government. Because when you look at it, folks, we have been infiltrated by foreign forces. Now, they didn't come in their uniforms and their tanks and take over our cities. What they did, they used these Alinsky methods of infiltrating our government with their people. Now, their people are the Senior Executive Service folks. They work alongside regular civil servants to make sure that the civil servants can't get their job done. They also make sure that all the contracts go to Serco, because Serco is also connected to the real rulers of America. So they get those fat cat contracts. And then what we're finding out is even bigger than that. It's USAID, it's OPIC. It's like the whole system is set up, and like George Carlin said, it's a big club, and we aren't in it.
That's a fact, and the as you were describing it, the senior executive service is basically built upon the old models of the British and the way that there are elite, and that the crown at the top, the monarchy at the top, is exempt from everything. And that's the reason that she has the golden share, both in Rio Tinto and Serco, and probably in BAE. We're finding out that really it comes down to the Queen. But no one can know the Queen's business, both in England or with the Bank of England or with the Parliament or anywhere in the world.
Well, isn't that the case usually when, you're doing evil things and you want to keep it from folks? But what they've been doing is they've been ruling this planet for much too long. And thank goodness for the internet, where we're able to get these messages out to a critical mass of people who can begin thinking and looking at things in a similar way.
And thanks heavens for the researchers that Michael McKibben helps direct, because these good researchers have found out the proof of these things instead of conspiracies. I'd often heard that, of course, the world is ruled by three independent nations called the Vatican City, the City of London, and Washington, D.C. But when you start looking into these things, that's really not, it's an abbreviated form, but when you look closely and you actually dig down and you find the golden shares, or you find that the appointed advisor can then be, in fact, the Secretary of Economics and Business for all of UK. So you find out that inside of these corporations, people have special voting rights, special shares, special control that is beyond imagination. So let's go back to USAID. USAID, let's say for Obama, $50 billion in a year, let's say $30 billion went out through USAID. Well, we now know it goes to different groups who simply siphon the money off and spend it, or act as if they're U.S. sponsors and representatives of America. The money never really, in some cases, gets to where it's going, because many of these corporations or companies are just created just to receive that check, put it in an offshore account, put it in a Cayman Island account, put it in a tax haven, and then do some special project, whether it be building a solar farm to create energy, or whether it be a wind farm, or whether it be some, you can't believe the things under which these things fly. They are so obviously scams. It's pathetic to look at some of them.
I like the scam called political risk insurance.
Oh, that is beautiful, because they'll not only loan a country huge amounts of money, supposedly, and then it goes to an American company, which then goes there and rips off their resources and fleeces them. But let's say that they're having a bit of trouble. Well, they know that they can call on the CIA or the U.S. military to defend any U.S. corporation anywhere, any
Stir up a little turmoil.
Oh, yeah.
Then they come in with their corporations and raid the country's resources, and they get all this aid, never goes to the people. It all stays with the fat cats. It's disgusting.
And then OPEC makes sure to give them insurance to hedge against political instability, literally, and so they can go in and know there's going to be political instability, create it, and make money off of it.
And who is on OPIC? They're all senior executive service employees.
It's totally ran by SES. Now, let's look at OPIC for a minute. The overseas private
with a .gov website,
and we pay $100 million a year to run it, but somehow it's private. The Overseas Private Investment Corporation. So it's a corporation, so it doesn't have to answer to anybody. That's the reason they don't keep track of this money after they give it away, and somehow magically, though they started off with hardly any money, just loan guarantees.
How did they get a .gov website when they call themselves private?
Well,
what are they really?
They're basically a monopoly. They're a obfuscation of corporate theft under the aegis or the auspices of humanitarian aid, which it is not. We've listed many of these contracts for OPEC. again, Overseas Private Investment Corporation, works directly with the United States Agency for International Development. So OPEC works with USAID. As a matter of fact, USAID and OPEC state on their own websites that they work hand in glove. As a matter of fact, if you get aid, money, a grant for humanitarian causes from USAID, it's highly likely you're going to be given as much money as you want in loans and U.S.-backed guaranteed loans for as long as 10 years to do a project in a place that Americans don't even know where it is, Myanmar or...
And who goes to check?
Zimbabwe or... it's just amazing, these places.
For example, you're in Zimbabwe, you may not even know that this money was given to your country to do that. You don't know. So I would suggest every third world country, you make sure that whoever is in charge of the monies in your country gets a hold of this audio and this article, and then you know where to go to find out if your country has been awarded money through one of these corporations, so you can get on them and make sure they spend every dollar. That goes with Ivanka Trump's program. The folks in South America, they need to be on the ball and make sure every dollar goes to every woman down there.
Now, the sad thing is, not a penny from USAID or from OPIC goes to anyone except U.S. sponsors. And the U.S. sponsors are banks, insurance companies, hedge funds, made-up new companies with offshore accounts in Cayman Islands or in, you just name it. It's in Delaware. Anytime you see Delaware, that's usually a very fake corporation. It's a scam. And so as you look at who this money is going to, a fifth grader could figure out that it's a scam, okay? And then you say, well, what about...
Well, apparently not the senior executive service staff members. They just sign these things and pass them on.
They get their enrichment because of their exorbitant salaries that are above the salaries of civil servants. They know they're part of a system that is based upon the British system of elite, corporate, corrupt manipulation, where you try to keep everything secret. You don't know the names of SES members until recently, when the search engine was created to find their names in the Plum Book. They were completely obfuscated. They had booby traps and tripwires and you name it in the documents, so you couldn't search it. And even then, you still can't find out what these people make. Only the 500 lawyers who work for the Department of Justice, same group of people, like Bill Orr is on that group, they can't be fired, and they're the ones who give out these salaries. So it's an old system. It's like the system in Britain that says there is a livery system, like a guild, for each aspect of business. But only the Queen knows the committee members. So no one, and it's secret. So the members who run that guild, run that particular aspect of the UK government in business, nobody knows who they are. And they can't tell anybody. They sit on the committee. And only the Queen knows who they are. And at any time, she can tell them what to do. She has, of course, veto power, which people don't understand still to this very day. So when we're talking about USAID, there's $30 billion goes out to humanitarian, $20 billion for military. So that's the Department of State, the State Department. That's Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton gave anybody she wanted these contracts. And this is every year. This isn't, a one-time shot. So of the $20 billion, most of it went to particularly Afghanistan, Iraq, Israel, Syria, billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars to a few countries where we continue to conduct war, or we did up until recently. And then what do? We turn around and give that country money after we've destroyed it. As a matter of fact, the $1.3 billion that went to Syria, $1 billion of it we now know Obama gave to ISIS to fight against the regime in Syria, to fight against the president of Syria.
Now, I like what you have in the article here. You have some of these contracts listed that folks you can go to and look at, and you can just see for yourself when you read them. You go, oh, there's no corruption here. And I'll just throw one out there. The Africa Eye Foundation. It's an eye hospital in Cameroon. And guess who the sponsor is? The Conrad Hilton Foundation. Hilton is in hotels. So you folks in Cameroon, they were given $10.2 million. Now, was that spent? Because if not, you want to contact the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation and get your money.
That's right.
In fact, we've got them all listed here that your research could find. And I would suggest you go in there and you make sure that these companies have paid you what they said that they were going to do for you, like a solar project in Jordan, right? For $56 million. $56 million. What kind of reporting do we taxpayers have that was done? And why are we spending $56 million in Jordan for a solar project?
And it goes on and on, Betsy, just as you're pointing out. Any one of those you look at, you're just going to go, what? You did what? You spent $300 million to build a Marriott in Afghanistan? A Marriott hotel, a luxury hotel. You needed that to overlook the opium fields, I guess. Or what was it? Did the Taliban need a new target to shoot at? Well, anyway, we can go into this. How about $1.4 billion given to Noble Gas Company to drill for oil in 2016 in Israel? And then Genie Oil comes along and other oil companies come along and they make the money off of it. But the U.S. government gave the loan, or the U.S. taxpayers gave, well, they say that it didn't come from us, but of course it did. The original monies all came from U.S. taxpayers.
We've got Congress people, senators, they're dual citizens. They got one foot in Israel and one foot in the United States. Who are they loyal to? Of course they look at this stuff and sign off because Israel's going to get the money. Why do we have anybody in elected positions at the federal level that has dual citizenship?
Well, because we also have Pakistanis, and we give Pakistan 1.7, what was it?
Oh,
no, 700 million, and Trump just cut back on that by about half. But the point is we give money to our enemies like crazy.
Well, that keeps good war, and that's good for war business.
And so then OPEC comes along, and if somebody has received money from USAID, they then just say, hey, can you give me some money to do such and so? And then they give them that money too. And, you know, as we pointed out, it can take 10 years perhaps to pay back the loan, and there are really no reporting requirements, and really there's hardly any requirements to get these. And so who is it that gets them? Just take a close look. It's all the same people. Wells Fargo, Citibank, oil companies that we're all familiar with. And who are we doing it for? Ukraine, El Salvador, Honduras,
but we have no money
Jordan,
to build a wall.
Israel?
No money at all.
Oh no, we can drill
We can
for
only
oil.
give crumbs for tax breaks.
And there is no income coming back from that. The money that is made off of those projects does not come back either to OPEC or to the United States
But it
taxpayers.
surely goes back to those transnational corporations.
But they say that they're self-funding. Oh, they don't mention that $88 million a year in 2016 went to pay for them to write those checks. And they don't mention that we throw about $20 million at them a year just, you know, just for some, I guess, what would you call that, spending money, so they can, you know, take trips to Las Vegas and such. And then $108 million a year, but they want to say they're private, and they want to say they can't answer to the U.S. taxpayer. But what do? They support individuals, hedge funds, especially banks. The longest list is banks. This is money going to banks to give to banks. Not even, in some cases, banks in those countries that the money is supposed to go to those countries. In many, many cases, it will be for loans, interbank loans between banks, or loans for small business loans, or loans for individuals. How is that ever proven? Especially in these countries that are so obscure that there's not going to be any reporting from them anyway. So that's the reason OPIC has to remain private, because if you start asking too many questions.
But it has a .gov thing at the end, and taxpayers are putting money in it. And this, you know, when you have to cut back your own family budget to make sure everything works, let me tell you, they're taking your taxpayer money and they're spending it lavishly on themselves. If we could roll back all this, in fact, I want you to talk about that right now, how we stop this. Because if we could roll this back, Thomas, we could slash our income tax bill by a half at least.
Oh, yes, there's ways to do that. Now, first, Trump has already started defunding the very organizations at the United Nations that are created to do these things. The World Health Organization, he's defunded. He's defunded the UN peacekeepers. He's defunded, and is going to more, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And hopefully he will start disassembling the World Trade Organization. and many of also the UN Refugee Agency. These agencies are doing what USAID is supposed to do. These agencies are doing in the United Nations, and we're spending tens of billions. No one knows actually how much, because we pay dues and then we get a bill at the end of the year. So nobody knows. We could estimate, but let's just say that already tens of billions have been cut off in funds going to the United Nations that are supposed to be doing these humanitarian deeds and supposed to be helping countries to demilitarize and to be safe, like the UN peacekeepers. But they found, and every time they're looked at, it's found that the UN peacekeepers are not keeping peace. They're actually taking advantage of the people that they're supposed to be watching. As a matter of fact, they have one of the worst records for violations. Let's just call it what it is, rape. The UN peacekeepers are a bunch of rapists. And this is all over the news. I'm not making this up. If you take the World Health Organization, they're giving out vaccines for HPV that are killing children.
Not to mention the human trafficking that's going on all around the world. And people always say, but you're leaving out the Vatican. Well, don't worry, we're getting there. We can only go so fast. We're going step by step, taking it down, one step at a time.
The UN Refugee Agency has been taken down by Trump completely, coming into America. This stops the funds going to the Vatican. So in one fell swoop, he basically said, it's a fraud, it's not working, we'll do it ourselves. And what do we find? We find that no one was being vetted. We're finding that those people come up missing very shortly after they come to America, and no one even knows where they are. Is this human trafficking? One can only assume.
Oh, then they get paid twice. They get paid because they brought the refugee in. These are these Catholic charities that are associated with it. They said they get paid for the refugee, but then the refugees just mysteriously disappear, and we already know we have organ trafficking problems and human trafficking. So really this is about the monetization of the human being.
These 184 agencies that place refugees in America are now attempting to sue America because they are all going bankrupt. But let's remember that when their refugees are placed, the money still comes through those agencies. The check comes to them. It doesn't come to the refugees. And even if the refugees come up missing, those agencies still get the money. Are you beginning to see the scam? This is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, why is Trump doing these things? Because he's started a war. He called it a national emergency against human trafficking and all other forms of crime. So what he's doing is absolutely point on. Now, what he probably will do is once Ivanka sees that OPIC is completely corrupt from top to bottom, he'll simply say, no, we're not going to do this anymore. No, we already have agencies who do this. And by the way, 3 times over, you not only have USAID and OPIC, but you have other governmental agencies, federal governmental agencies, doing the exact same thing for emergency relief, for food, for agriculture, for all these things, for energy. It's already going on in other agencies. We're giving away billions of dollars there also. We're also giving it away through the United Nations. So we were giving triple the amount and basically getting almost, well, let's just say getting very little for it. Because
I think the average American knows the word we're looking for here. We know what's happening to us.
What, a ripoff?
I would have other words to say for it.
Oh, I see. That's,
okay.
Yes, I think
so,
that's great.
Look at the article. It's just chock full of things. In closing, you have anything to suggest that people look at in there?
Well, these things can be ended quite easily because they're frauds. They're fake. Under no circumstances should the State Department be giving out money for militarization. That is part of our NATO peace agreements. It's part of many peace agreements that we have. And Trump is making those people now pay for the first time for doing their part and making them do their part and paying for us to do what was their part before. So he's come and he's presented bills to all of these people. And that's the way it should be. No more should America be the handout to everyone in the world. We should have secure borders so that we have respect for the people who followed the immigration laws to come into this country and be protected and not be assaulted by illegal aliens or be insulted by the fact that just because you cross over a border and you have a baby here, that makes you an American citizen. In fact, when you are a criminal. So what we're seeing is very good. We see it all over, with what Trump is doing with the wall, with sanctuary cities, with the national emergency, with the human trafficking, with all these different things, with what's happening in Syria, he's defunding Afghanistan over time because he's actually accomplishing the tasks and the goals of the war. We're getting out of Iraq more and more every day. We're getting out of Syria. We're getting out of all these wars. And I loved what Ron Paul just said. He said he had multiple conversations just recently. He said this yesterday with Trump. And Trump said, I'm done with all these wars all over the place. America is getting out of the wars. We don't need these wars. And we also don't need U.S. aid to give weapons to simply promote wars based upon pay-to-play through Hillary Clinton's Secretary of State scheme, which then became John Kerry's pay-to-play. That's the reason John Kerry's son was placed and given deals in China and in Ukraine, or Joe Biden getting his deals for his son Hunter Biden in Ukraine and China. No, we got to stop this pay-for-play through the State Department, through the White House, and through the federal government, and through all aspects, whether it be lobbying in the Congress, or whether it be super PACs, or whether it be corrupt election donations. We need to go back to the simple 2 terms limit. We need to get the lawyers off of Capitol Hill, and we need to get the lawyers and the corporate warlords out of taking our humanitarian funds and basically just spending them on themselves.
I wanted to also close a little something about senior executive service and all the corruption in D.C., because folks write me and they all go, my gosh, if we get rid of these people, the government's going to collapse. Well, my word to that is, we don't need a central government that's been created. This country was not founded on a principle that all power resides within that beltway. In fact, this is a great reason. If we pull the plug on this and get rid of all these folks, put them out of work, they can go back to their home states, get on unemployment, or find other jobs. Let's get the power back to the 50 states, or that might increase if California decides to split in 3. And let's get the power back to the states, because there's no need for this concentrated power except for the globalists who want to keep rolling it up. And when you do that, of course, they have to have these infrastructures that are clandestine and don't tell us what's really going on, and they just kind of overlay like a cancer in our bloodstream. So I say, folks, let's collapse Washington, get as much as we can out of the swamp, put it back in the states where it belongs, get rid of this senior executive service, stop all contracts that are Serco-like. If you're outside of the country, you don't get the contract unless it's something we cannot produce here. We got to get rid of that. We have to collapse the crown agents, and we have to put a flag in the ground and say we won the American Revolution. It might have taken us a bit of time, but we didn't know we were being brainwashed and told the wrong history. But now there are too many of us that are awake and we can do it. And this is just not in America. This is around the world, because if Americans are controlled by this elite cabal, every country in this world is, and we will never be free, and we'll never be able to realize our full human potential until we overthrow these chains that have enslaved us for centuries.